Hello, everyone, and welcome to your Wednesday webinar with Squibbler. I'm Moxie, your host. Today, I'm really excited to talk to you about how to develop memorable characters for your novel or script. And these are going to help you to develop characters that stand the test of time. So in this webinar, we're going to talk about the importance of planning your characters and your plot together. We'll take a look at some tips for creating memorable characters, and some of this will include ways that you can use Squibbler's AI to help how to create more memorable characters. We'll also take a look at some places to look for inspiration as you're developing your characters. So it is important to pre-write and think about your characters prior to writing your project. When readers pick up books, why do why do movie viewers tune into movies? What are they looking for? What we really want to see is a compelling story with interesting and rich characters. So a lot of the work that you're going to do with characterization involves pre-writing. This doesn't feel like work a lot of the time. You get to imagine you're someone else. And probably one of the most interesting things that I've heard someone say they do when they're thinking about their characters is Alan Moore, who wrote The Watchmen. He says he likes to stand in front of a mirror and pretend he's a character to get into that character's head as he's writing. So that might be something fun for you to try as well. And then also, when you're still in the planning stage, you might want to rewatch some scenes from a film if you're writing a script that involves some of your favorite characters, or revisit some of your favorite characters in novels or short stories. Ask yourself what makes these characters compelling to you. You can even make a mind map of adjectives that come to mind when you think of this character. For example, if I think about Hannibal Lecter, I might use the word intimidating, ferocious, and that sort of thing. So make a list of adjectives for yourself. Once you've finished watching this webinar and you've learned some of the tips to help you with characterization, you can use the free character worksheet to help you develop your characters. You'll use the worksheet, plan your characters, and then you can use them to create your elements in Squibbler. Let your imagination go wild as you're doing this. And this worksheet is going to be available for you in the resource library and on our Discord server. So you'll be able to find our Discord server by searching for Squibbler, and the link will be in the YouTube comments if you find this video on YouTube. And this is what our character worksheet is going to look like. It will help you design your character, plan it out before you create it as an element. We also have a character generator in Squibbler. Before you sign in to your account, scroll down to the bottom of our front page, our home page, and you'll see at the very bottom there's a character generator. This can help you to gather some ideas as well as you're preparing to create your masterpiece. So what are some things that make characters compelling to us? We do like to see characters on film and read characters in books that are relatable to us. We do like them to be complex at all, not just a stereotype or one note. It's often important to make an emotional connection with a character as well. We like to see how characters are going to react to situations that we might not ever face. We're also interested in quirks that make us unique. Everybody is unique, and we all have things that we do that are unique to us. And some of those can be kind of odd. Those are fun to include with characters as well. We also like to look at how characters respond to challenges. There's a whole genre on that. The action genre is based on how people react to extreme situations. Another thing that can make characters compelling is if we have shared values that we can share with them, or they represent something that we can reject, like the villain. So here are some tips for creating great characters in Squibbler. Creating a great character is a bit like that idiom about seeing sausage made. Your reader does not need to know all of the details that have gone into your backstory for your character. But as a writer, you're going to want to know a lot of detail about your characters. And this is where Squibbler's AI can really help you. So one thing that you can use as you're setting up your element is this attributes section. The attributes list here on creating an element is infinite. So you can really delve in deep with your character development. You can put things like hair color, eye color, astrological sign, personality, and so forth, and create a very strong description for your character. The AI is then going to use all of this information as it generates text for you, as it generates dialogue for you, and even as it generates images for you. So for example, if I define a character as being sarcastic, a lot of his behavior and a lot of his dialogue is going to reflect the fact that I have defined that character as sarcastic. Defining your character's attributes will also give you more specific details, and the AI will pick up on this, as I've said. One thing to avoid mentioning too much in your text, though, is characters' eye color and hair and so forth. You don't want to repeat this over and over because your readers will already know, for example, that your character has blue eyes or has brown hair. It's one of those things that you mention early on, but you're not going to mention it too many times. This might create too much exposition in your work and not enough showing. So let's look at an example. An example here would be saying Marilyn Monroe is beautiful or Marilyn Monroe had blonde hair. If you repeat this too many times, it really weighs down your description of your character. So one good tip here is to look at how people respond to your characters. So I rewrote this sentence of Marilyn being beautiful as when Marilyn entered a room, men and women both stopped mid-conversation to look at her. Waiters would stare when she entered the restaurant, even spilling the occasional drink on a diner. You do want to make sure you avoid stereotypes. And one of the things that we sometimes see in movies and books that we don't particularly care for is stereotyping. Characters become flat and boring if they're all good or they're all evil. And in real life, humans do have flaws. So think about how you can develop your hero with quirks or flaws. Maybe your hero is perpetually late, and this is a problem for them. Maybe in your villain's free time, he or she rescues kittens. A great example of this balance could be in something like Lady Eboshi from Princess Mononoke, and we'll take a look at that later on. But if you've seen this movie, Lady Eboshi has both good and evil in her, and she becomes a very compelling secondary character for that reason. So in books and on screen, characters, as I said, can become very boring if they're all good or all evil. So think about how you can develop a hero with quirks or flaws. And we'll talk about this again with some examples. Even your villain or your antagonist should be balanced to some degree. This is going to help them to avoid being comical or cliche when you intend for them to have depth. So someone like Magneto from X-Men is a good example of a villain with understandable motives. We may not always like the way he acts and what he does, but his fear that mutants are going to face something similar to the Holocaust and his distrust of humans is completely believable, and we can sympathize with it. You also want to make sure that your protagonist is going to change. Readers and viewers like to see how people learn from experiences. We don't want to live through the great tragedies we see on stage or film or read about in books. We don't want to be Hamlet, for example. It's much safer for us to live through dynamic characters' experiences vicariously. And so we want to see some kind of a journey for our characters. So one way that you can ensure that your plot is character-driven is by planning your character's arc before you write. This is a really fun exercise, and it can take several forms. And there are a few examples here for you. So one is the story spiral. And this is from Tim Wagner's excellent book on writing horror, Writing in the Dark. Although it's something he created for horror, you can use it for other genres as well. This structure is going to allow you to add plot points, and that's going to go into an increasingly tighter and tighter spiral as your action gets tighter and tighter, and it will lead up at the end of the tale as you see in the center. So here you can place your plot points on this spiral. At the same time, you're placing how your character is going to change as well. Another tip here, or another example that you can use, is the story cycle system. This is from Park Howell's book, The Brand Bewitchery, and it's going to adapt Joseph Campbell's hero's journey into a story spiral, where you'll start with the backstory. And you'll see here, this is in the center of this diagram. And here, this is not anything your reader needs to see, but it is all the things that you as the writer, you're going to know about your character that's going to bring them up to the moment your story begins. It's also going to affect the way they behave. So this can contribute to the plot as well. So you can try this strategy to combine plot and character as well as you're plotting out what's going to happen in your story. Scribbler also has plot and character arc worksheets for our writers who are using the 5 or 3-act structure. And although these are in our screenplay writing or our script writing worksheets in Discord, you can also apply them to novels if you're interested in trying this structure. And you'll see here that the first page of the worksheet is going to have you design your plot to have your climax, your resolution, and so forth. And then the second part is going to have you to do the same thing with your character development. So you can look at your plot points for your plot and then design how your character is going to react to those plot points. And this is also in the Discord server under the screenplay writing webinar. So I thought this was a really fun tip that David Mitchell, who wrote Cloud Atlas, says he uses. He likes to write letters from his characters and then send them to himself, so he'll get them at various times. And he'll have his characters respond to a variety of topics. If you want to try this to help develop your character to see how they're going to respond, what their language is like, you can even use Squibbler to make this task really easy. Once you've set up your elements, you can use the write and then the guided write and then epistolary function, the narrative perspective of epistolary, to instruct the AI to write a letter, and you can say what the topic is. Your character can even send you notes of encouragement as you're writing your letter. So that's really fun as well. So this is how you would do this. You're going to use the guided write and the smart writer. And you'll see that at the example I have here is Romeo writing a sonnet to Juliet in a letter after their balcony movement. I've added the elements that I want to use. And then down here for the narrative perspective, I've used epistolary. And the smart writer does a really great job with this. You'll see here it says, "My dearest Juliet." And he's opening up with just a prose version of what he wants to say to her. And then there's this lovely poetry that the AI has created too, because I asked the AI to create a poem within this letter. So it's done all of these functions. So another tip to creating great characters for your project is to find the foil. So one way to highlight your protagonist qualities is to create a foil for them. And a foil is a character who has different values or personality from another character. So an example from film would be the carefree hobbits, Pippin and Merry. If you compare their behavior to Frodo, who has this heavy burden and he's frightened and scared and exhausted, they are good foils for him. They bring a comedic tone to his heavy tone. Another tip when you're creating your characters is to have really strong dialogue. We all have different nuances in our speaking patterns. Characters need distinctive dialogue to distinguish them from one another. So you want to make sure your characters all speak differently from each other. If they all sound the same, your characters will be dull and flat. So in Squibbler's AI, one way to do this is to play around with the tone and the instructions that you give the AI in the guided write or create a scene. Another thing to think about with your character development is motivation, what your characters want. It's crucial to have a clear idea in your head of what your major character's motivations are. And motivation and theme of your project are often tied together. So developing one is going to help develop the other. The antagonist needs are usually in conflict with the protagonists. So knowing their desires will also clearly strengthen your plot. In addition to your character's wants and needs and desires, something should get in the way for your character and cause conflict. And this holds true for antagonists as well. By building tension, by creating hurdles for your protagonists and keeping them from achieving their goals, you'll be able to build on that tension. Some models for this from the novel and television series Game of Thrones is Daenerys Targaryen and Arya Stark. We see them struggle through a series of conflicts that changes who they are from the beginning of those books to where George R.R. Martin is with them now. Squibbler also has a webinar on developing conflict for you in our Discord server if that's something that you are interested in watching. Another tip that might help you is to journal with some of your characters. You can use this to develop your character's backstory and inner thinking and motivations, and you can use Squibbler's AI to do this. You can create a first-person journal for them. You could create a folder in your book that you're already writing or your screenplay you're already writing. At the bottom of your document, you can create a folder and a file that's a journal for major characters. And then have the guided writer use this function in first person, the first person narrative perspective, and give it a prompt with the element you want to write about. Have them write some entries. And you're going to be surprised to see what your characters are going to tell you. So another way to think about conflict is if your characters are struggling with internal factors or making a decision, you can also use Squibbler's AI for this. You can use the rewrite and more inner conflict feature in Squibbler to build on this conflict. So this could be something like a character making a difficult decision or falling out of love, or anything that's going to really cause some internal pressure for that character. For external, you can use Squibbler's rewrite more intense, and this is going to heighten outside factors that affect your protagonist. So this could be things like really creating more tension in a scene and in an action movie where someone has to stop a bomb. It will increase that level of tension for you as well. So some places to find inspiration as you're developing characters. One is the known. Lots and lots of writers like to go and listen to people talk in coffee shops and take notes. So that's one thing that you can do. The other thing is people do like to talk about their lives. So if you're writing about a character with certain traits, ask one of your friends with similar traits to read that draft. You could ask them how they would respond to an event similar to the one that you're working on and that you're writing. So another thing to look for is the unknown. We have to do this a lot as writers. We have to do some research. So let's say that you're writing about a topic or theme on grief. Conduct some research. You can find some books at your local library. You can read some blogs devoted to that topic, join groups related to that topic, watch videos on YouTube. This is going to help you to understand how your character acts and thinks. And you can take some notes about people who are, facing the same topic or grief that you're writing about. So now we'll take a look at some brief literary or film inspirations to help you kind of, get some ideas as well. So think about the kind of character you're writing and look to successful film or novel characters in the same genre you're writing. For example, if you are writing a naive and likable character, Forrest Gump is a really good model. He's a very sympathetic figure. And someone like Mark Twain's Huck Finn, despite the fact that he has a rough exterior, he's also innocent and very good at heart. If you want to develop strong character arcs, watching a series like Breaking Bad is a terrific choice. Both Walter and Jesse are well-written characters who see significant changes over the course of the series. Someone like Severus Snape from the Harry Potter series has a compelling redemption arc that keeps readers engaged. We want to see what's going to happen next. We follow these characters on this journey, and we're engrossed in how they're going to react to things that happen to them. If you're working on creating memorable villains, this is always a lot of fun. Someone like Salieri from the film Amadeus is a good model. Someone like Bill the Butcher from Gangs of New York is terrifying, and Hannibal Lecter, who's only on screen for a short amount of time, leaves a very memorable, lasting impression on viewers and readers of the book. They're all nuanced, they're fascinating and terrifying. They do have some good aspects to them too. They're not completely bad. You want to work on your secondary characters as well, because these are going to enrich your work. Not all of your secondary characters should have names, by the way. You don't need to name everybody who shows up in your project. Just name the important ones. But you can have really great secondary characters, and the term for these is comparse. It's a term for an extra or a smaller role. One of the greats that came to mind to me when I was thinking about this webinar was Quint from the movie Jaws. I don't think you could quote anything that Quint has said to me, and I wouldn't know immediately who had said it, and I would get a picture in my mind of who is saying it. You've got this, rough, crusty, crude sailor who's just rude to everybody that encounters him, but he's memorable. Ron Weasley is another good comic relief example. He's a secondary character in Harry Potter. He also serves somewhat as a foil for Hermione and also for Harry, and he brings in some light moments. So he's a very memorable secondary character as well. Another thing to think about is who we can root for, the characters we like to root for, making them relatable. And these are the underdog or the everyman or everywoman. So you might take a look at the success of the Bridget Jones novel series, something like the novel The Devil Wears Prada, and the film The Truman Show. Here we have very regular, normal people who are facing, conflict in their everyday lives. They're not, on a spaceship fighting aliens or in a horror film or something. They're actually just living their day-to-day lives, and we like to see how people in those situations react as well. They appeal to us because they represent us. The unreliable or dangerous character can also be compelling. Humbert from Nabokov's book Lolita is interesting because he shares his darkest secrets with the reader, almost to the point where you cringe. And it's in first person, so it's even that more terrifying. Annie Wilkes from Stephen King's Misery is even more terrifying because she hides under this veneer of concern at the very beginning. Shakespeare's Iago refuses to reveal why he's destroyed the innocent Othello and Desdemona in Shakespeare's play. These are all memorable and creepy villains. And they're unreliable. We don't really know why they're doing what they're doing or what they're going to do next. The flawed character is also a strong character to create. So Song Gi-hung from Squid Games is a compulsive gambler and a failing father, and yet somehow he's also very, very likable. We're rooting for him. His traits also influence the plot. So this is one of those examples where you can see where character arc and plot are strongly tied together. Lady Eboshi, as I mentioned earlier from Miyazaki's Princess Mononoke, she has terrible means to accomplish noble ends. She wants to destroy the great animals that live in the forest so she can save women who are forced to work in brothels. So her goals are noble, but her means are terrible. We can't outright reject either of these characters, though. They both have compelling reasons to root for them. So as we're winding down near the end, here's a tip just for fun. I would recommend trying that epistolary function to write a letter. Have one of your characters write a letter to you. You can print it out, put it on your wall. Maybe they can encourage you. Maybe they can say something to another character, and it will inspire you as you're working through your project. So in this webinar, we did talk about the importance of planning character. We talked about some tips for creating memorable characters and some way you can use the AI to do that. And we also talked about how to use Squibbler's tools to help you as you're developing your characters. Hope you enjoyed it, and thank you as always for joining us. We will see you next week. Bye, everyone.